In the quiet town of Skidmore, Missouri, one man's reign of terror went unchallenged until his shocking murder in 1981. This was the culmination of years of fear and frustration, but the identity of the killer remains a mystery. Today, we analyze the background and theories behind who killed Ken McElroy. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the supernatural. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
So is this some kind of serial killer of some kind?
He's got a toot on him. I think that's what the kids call it. He's not a serial killer, but he has done he's a ne'er-do-well. And we'll get into all of it.
So he's done a handful of heinous things and then eventually was confirmed to be murdered?
Yes. So he's definitely been killed. It's a story about town justice, but who did it? It's not so much why, but who did it becomes a very interesting kind of conversation. And we'll unfold the whole thing. But I feel like this town is so small. It's very much a story of a small town.
Right.
Justice. I don't know how else to put it, you know?
Three things here. One, I've always wondered what it would be like to live in such a small town like that.
Mm-hmm.
Two, obviously we want to know how and why. But if this person was a confirmed, just terrible person, then, this is one of the few cases where I go, obviously people want to know how and why. I don't need to know. He's a bad guy. He got what was coming to him. You know what I'm saying?
Dude, he got what was coming to him 100%. And you're going to find out quite delayed. This is a case of very delayed justice and a lot of pent up tension in this town. What was your third thing?
The third thing is this reminds me a little bit of a game that I played on Xbox. It's called Condemned Criminal Origins. And the whole theory and story behind that game is you're a investigator of the law, and you are hunting down a serial killer that kills serial killers in the way they kill their victims.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
that game rules.
That game rolled.
I've never even heard of this one. I had to look it up. It almost has like a Resident Evil style art.
Oh yeah, the graphics are very outdated, but yeah, it was the story itself was interesting, and then the game itself was very creepy, but I always liked that premise very, very much. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like a unique game.
Yeah, you'd hear about a serial killer, and then that serial killer would die in the same way that he would kill others, and then it's like, oh, who's doing this to them? So,
yeah, a 2005 game. Interestingly, we dove into video games over movies. We might have to become a video game podcast about mysteries soon.
Cover the whole genre.
Yeah. Well, before we dive in, as always, I want to give a huge shout out to some of our supporters in the task force over on patreon.com/redweb. It is the best way to support us now that we're independent. It goes directly to us and allows us to continue doing the podcast and everything else going on. So, Casey McCrary, and then of course our squonks, Gavin Day, Mitch W, G, and Zarathustra. Thank you all so much. And we'll talk more about what you get on Patreon at the end of the show. I'll get into all the deets, but basically ad-free content, bonus material, etc. Looks behind the scenes. Oh, and also, I did stay up all night. I managed to finish the store.redwebpod.com. Merch is available. The Founders merch exclusive to August, so get that now if you want to support the show from the very beginning. There's been so many people supporting us at our new chapters here in Independence. It's a really cool shirt that we had designed by our friend Meg Turner. So we have that. We have some other cool merch up there, so go check it out. Once again, store.redwebpod.com. But let's dive into this case, starting with the sensitive topics. You can find a list of those in the description. So let me take you back to the 1970s. Here we are in the town of Skidmore, Missouri, which was plagued by a man who repeatedly seemed to evade justice for his crimes. So Skidmore, just so you know, is a small farming town roughly 100 miles north of Kansas City, Missouri, and as of 2022, had a population of only 239 people. So we got a town here where everyone kind of knows each other. But to be a little bit more accurate to the case, I went back and looked, and the population in the 1970s, while still small, was around 440. Ken Rex McElroy was born June 1st, 1934, and was raised in this town. He was the 15th of 16 total children born to an impoverished family, and he was known for his large imitating stature, both in his youth and into his adulthood. And for all intents and purposes, he was known by locals, many locals anyway, to be the town bully. And at 15 years old, he dropped out of school to work various manual labor jobs, but this is kind of when his criminal history began. Now, his lawyer, Richard McFadden, told the New York Times that by the 1970s, he had been charged with at least 3 crimes per year on average. Overall, he had 21 indictments with no convictions and was suspected of many more crimes, including theft, arson, burglary, stealing livestock, sexual assault, and more.
Stealing livestock? What is this man doing stealing chickens and stuff?
Plucking chickens off streets, tipping cows into his pickup. I don't know what he's doing.
That sounds like something teenagers would do,
100%. And what's interesting, a lot of people, farmers especially, that is their livelihood. So while most of us see them as just living creatures that they are, or perhaps even pets, if you like teacup pigs, taking people's livestock is actually just robbing them of their livelihood. So it is weird, but I guess it makes sense in a small farming town, or any farming location. Now, many said he had used threats and intimidation tactics to get away with these crimes. But of course, as you know, he is a lawyer, will unfold this whole chapter, but it seems he also used a lot of legal tactics as well. In fact, with regards to that, it's also been reported that he was known to brag about his lawyer, claiming that he was a lawyer for organized crime and that he greatly helped him avoid jail time. I think this is a very important brag, a boast, a bit of honesty coming from McElroy that will definitely come into play in the theories and later conversations. But to me, if we're talking about organized crime, we're talking about a big, city slick lawyer who knows all these rules, and we're operating in a very small town.
Also, that's just wild to me because, one, you never really hear people that are just running around like complete jerks having a lawyer being protected in that sense. And then 2, this said person just still being a complete deviant, just running around and then also saying, yeah, they also are a lawyer for like the mob or something like that. So it's just so wild to me to just run around so recklessly.
Oh my God. And you don't even know the half of it. We're going to get into very specific instances of just how reckless McElroy was able to get because he clearly was comfortable. What I'm curious about is how he's able to afford a so-called organized crime lawyer. If he comes from an impoverished family, where does his money come from? How is he able to afford this? That's a question that won't be answered if I'm honest. It's just one of those vague elements of one of these true crime cases, but it definitely plagued my mind as we were reading through these articles and kind of collating this information.
Damn, that's wild because I feel like we could, I know the government would have access to his accounts and stuff like that and see where the money's being funneled in from, but I guess it wouldn't be public information, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I'm very curious, Christian, if you don't mind, Christian, our man in the chair, our producer, if you wouldn't mind looking up, when did banking go more digital? I don't know if there's a time frame where banking left hard paperwork and became a little bit easier to track digitally, to Alfredo's point. Not exactly sure if that's something we can figure out on the fly, but I'd be very curious to know if the 70s would be something where the paperwork could be more obfuscated or not.
So you're asking about just kind of generally going more digital or anything in particular?
Yeah, just generally more digital.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like in general by the 90s is when it started making that transition.
Damn, later than we thought.
Okay, so banks were trying to keep up with the, that DNA analysis. I don't know why I said it Southern-like. I think I started thinking about Jurassic
sudden.
Park.
It was very sudden.
It was Dino DNA.
Yep.
DNA analysis. Anyway, let's get back to McElroy. So in 1974, this is the first of 3 pretty dark cases we're going to talk about. 1974, McElroy was able to avoid statutory rape charges by divorcing his wife and marrying his victim, Trina McLeod, and then having a child with her. She would become his third wife at only 14 years old. And it turns out McElroy actually met McLeod while dating her mother. So it's a very,
Ew.
yeah.
That's just the easiest way to put it. Ew.
Ooh, period. 100%. It's just a very, I think it starts to shine a little bit more light on this ne'er-do-well. Like, obviously he's going to get up to some crime, but it looks like he has no moral guidelines here in play at all.
Nope, none whatsoever.
In fact, with that said, when she attempted to run away and go back home, he burned down the girl's family home and then shot both of their family dogs.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, no, that's John Wick
Nah,
right there.
no, it's over.
You're going to wake up the beast.
It's over for this person.
Mm-hmm.
This is where, look, all right, this is where you just do, maybe someone just takes one for the team, and someone did, but maybe this is just you kidnap them, you put them in a cabin, all by lonesome
Oh my
out in the
God.
woods. You take a cigar cutter, you cut little bits of his fingers,
Oh,
and then
no.
you burn it shut, so then that way he doesn't bleed out. And then you when he was about to pass out, you wake him back up, and then do it again. When he's about to die, maybe
It's
give him
chop
a
a clock, you know?
little shot of water, maybe. I don't know.
Golly.
I don't know. I just off the top of my head, I'm maybe just not sure, but maybe someone needs to just take one for the team and do that. I don't, maybe they did. We don't quite know.
I really hope the specificity that you went in with doesn't implicate us here. Some sort of soothsayer. I don't know if some sort of future crime's about to happen that looks just like that, but I don't like it.
That was just a passing thought. That's all.
You know what? That was just, it was just a little bit of improv.
A little bit of
Just a little
improv for
joke.
someone that goes after dogs like that.
Well, you know what? When you bring dogs into it, world's most innocent creature.
They really
among
are.
Every other pet, too. Yeah, that's pretty sinister. But like I said, this man's got no rules, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. On July 27th, 1976, McElroy shot Skidmore farmer Romaine Henry twice in the stomach after Henry confronted him for firing a weapon on Henry's property. Essentially, Henry approached him and said, "Hey, why are you on my property firing a weapon? Please be gone," right?
Mhm.
And McElroy said, "Well, what are you going to do?" Approaches him.
Where is this in Missouri?
This is in Missouri, yes.
What are the gun laws there?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Because that's the perfect time to take advantage of a gun law there. If so,
Just a little pop.
if the guy's being a menace, he's burning down houses, shooting dogs, and he's on your property, just popping off. I mean, just let it rip, man.
Sure.
Beyblade style.
I can understand that. Yeah, I'm sure it's easier said than done, but Christian,
sure.
that is a great question. If we know what the guidelines were then in 1976, or maybe they're the same as now.
Today, there are no state licensing requirements to own a rifle or handgun, shotgun, any type of firearm in Missouri. That's the law today.
Yeah, it just kind of like grinds my gears that this person is just so out in the open, being very destructive to such a small town. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Such a-
100%.
Such a small town, and then on top of everything, it just complete disregard for, because a little bit of me at that point says, like, if there is a legal way to stop this, it kind of has to be done, right? Because then
Sure.
what else could this person do? Because it's clearly not
Right.
going to stop.
100%. That is exactly the crux of this case. I'm so glad you said that, because it is 100%. What else would they do? Because they have such a vivid track record.
Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it's just going to escalate, and then I don't know. In a moment like that, obviously, way easier said than done. In that moment, who knows who actually has the ability to do such things?
Right.
But it's just like, dude, if he's burning down houses, I mean, there could have been a family in there. Like, this person might just kill a child or something, or
Right.
God forbid.
It's terrible.
And so, yeah, it's just like, man, put this menace down.
Right. And no one wants to be in that decision-making
No.
point. They don't want to be the one there needing to make that. But now you're starting to see how this is really building a pressure in this town. And thankfully, getting back to Romaine Henry, he did survive. But while waiting for trial, McElroy would park his car outside Henry's house. A little bit of torment along the way. Henry reported that he must have parked there at least 100 times just to kind of rub it in his face, be very visual, and remind him every day that he's around.
I'm cutting that man's brake line 100%. I'm cutting the brake line.
Can't brake if you can't stop.
I mean, just come on, man. Like, Jesus. This guy just has complete no respect for anyone whatsoever, and it's just
Not
gonna
at all.
escalate. This person is I mean, look, I would be surprised that this person isn't locked up, but then again, we were talking about this person has a lawyer that's backing them up, so it's so frustrating.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating too. And we'll get a little bit from the lawyer here in just a second as to what kind of their MO was, like why and how they enabled this kind of behavior. But, you know, an example of how this lawyer really protected him comes even from this case. You know, McElroy was initially charged with assault with intent to kill. But this is where the lawyer, McFadden, started to do some of his, I don't know, I gesture my hands like a marionette puppet, but some lawyer stuff.
Yeah.
Sprinkle a little magic lawyer dust in here. When it went to court, McFadden brought in 2 witnesses, so-called witnesses. Both of them claimed that McElroy had an alibi, stating that he was never on Henry's land in the first place. He, McElroy, was out with us raccoon hunting on that day, so it was impossible for him to even be there. Additionally, McFadden then brought up Henry's own history of petty crime conviction, and it was from like decades prior, and eventually McElroy was acquitted of anything. So he walked scot-free because the lawyer was able to go, let's get these 2 guys in, let's get them to claim that he was somewhere else, nice alibi, and then also just flip the script and completely assassinate Henry's character.
Yeah.
Wild.
That is, Jesus, man. This guy is awfully skillful in a demonic way.
In a very unhinged and evil way. You know, McFadden actually told the New York Times that McElroy was his best client. The best client he ever had, in fact, because McElroy would pay any amount of money simply to keep himself out of jail.
Wow, I'm so curious how this person, I mean, again, we don't know, but just so curious as to how we know this. I mean, how he has access to this money.
That's what I'm so deeply fascinated by, because these guys are like bragging broad daylight. It's known that they're getting away with literally, well, attempted murder, but you have a man named Harry McLean who wrote a book on crimes called In Broad Daylight. Now, he wrote this specifically about McElroy. He said, quote, "He didn't have a bank account, didn't have a social security number. He didn't read. How did this uneducated person, how is he able to outwit the criminal justice system for 20 years?" End quote.
Jesus.
So going back to the idea of a digital footprint, that's even moot because he doesn't even have a bank account. So where's this cash coming from? When he had, you know, a hard upbringing with a lot of siblings, he is now kind of dropping out of school at 15, doing various manual labor jobs, but also criminal activity. I mean, maybe he simply stole it or extorted it. That is just a theory, but it would certainly fit.
Does the fact that this is a small town and maybe the lawyer is more of a big time lawyer, and then it's just a small town with very, I don't know, inexperienced court system or something? You know what I mean?
That's totally possible. I'm just wondering how he can pay for that. But 100%, we got some bigwig from the city, perhaps. I'm adding the city flair, but
right, yeah.
We have a theoretical organized criminal lawyer coming in, knowing a lot about the law and just pushing people around because you've got judges that, yeah, maybe haven't experienced this before. They don't know about appeals and delays and how to manipulate the court and legal system. And so they then have to back off until they look into it. And so, yeah, he's gaming the system in this small town is definitely what it feels like. But again, I still just don't know how or what this lawyer is getting out of it aside from the money. And again, I don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
Now, this is jumping forward in time, but it's leading to an incident that then culminates in McElroy's death. So in 1980, a convenience store employee accused one of McElroy's 10 kids, one of his daughters, of taking candy without paying for it. Of course, McElroy confronts the person, they start to argue, and he doesn't forget. He's a very heated person with a vendetta is what it seems like. And it seems then that after months of arguments, I read that he was stalking the family of some of these people that worked at the convenience store. It became clear that he wasn't going to let go of it. So at the store, there was a heated confrontation with the store's 70-year-old owner, Ernest Bo Bowenkamp. That then led to McElroy shooting him point blank in the neck with a shotgun on July 8th, 1980.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Just an absolute tear. My God.
Just one therapy session, just like, let's let some of the pressure out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it escalated.
Yeah. So luckily and incredibly, Bowenkamp survived. Another person who was shot essentially point blank, in this case, survived.
That is wild. It's, like in so many different angles. One, that this person is just unloading on people and getting away with it. And then two, these said people are surviving this thing.
Maybe it was bird shot, something like that. That would be more of just like painful and damaging than like a buckshot. But
true. Yeah.
But yeah. Either way, McElroy was arrested and charged with attempted murder. While waiting for the trial, McElroy reportedly parked outside of Bowenkamp's home every single day. But this time he added a little something extra. Not only would he terrorize him by reminding him every single day of his presence and parking in front of his home, he was periodically seen near the property carrying a rifle and making threats. There was a Newtown prosecutor at this point, and finally, McElroy was convicted of assault and then sentenced to a maximum of 2 years. So remember, he was charged with attempted murder and convicted of assault, given 2 years. However, I hear your reaction coming. However, his lawyer was able to appeal and then release McElroy on bail while the decision was being made. Basically, the appeal created a delay to further decide on the case, and while that delay was happening, he was out on bail, freely walking the streets.
God.
Yeah.
So wild.
I learned a little bit more about the court system and the legal system because there's like convicting and indicting and charging, and I don't know. It gets a little hard to follow for layman's terms. So let me know if you get lost. But yeah, he's out. And according to People magazine, in court, McElroy actually said, quote, "I've been fighting the law since I was 13 and I'm damn near 50. This is the first time I've lost." End quote.
Jesus. How is like
Confidence.
everyone not after this guy? I mean, like eventually justice is served, but
yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So of course, while out on bail, he continued to make vague threats to Bowenkamp while carrying a rifle around. Though this violated the terms of the bond, McFadden was able to continuously delay the hearing, essentially offering unofficial immunity. The case never came to pass, essentially. And the organized crime thing earlier kind of makes me start to think this is what's happening. You kind of pointed it out, but I wrote it in my notes like, is this big city lawyer pushing around all these small town judges or prosecutors?
Yeah.
Very much feels like what's happening. You have somebody who is well-versed in all the nooks and crannies and all the loopholes, and then you just have I'm just a prosecutor in this small town and I want to do right by the people. But of course, you're not going to know all the nooks and crannies because you're not operating with high organized crime all the time.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, frustrating. It's so fascinating that you say, I can't believe everyone's not after him, because your gut instinct is right on the money. We're about to get to essentially a mob and then McElroy's demise.
It doesn't surprise me that his demise came at the hands of probably someone within the community, because I mean, it just, at what point do you have to take matters into your own hands if, I don't know, if the justice system isn't going to do anything about it?
Unfortunately, it does feel like that. And of course, this is with the 1,000-foot view. In hindsight, we're able to see everything going on. And it also is 50 plus years ago. And so times are a little bit different. You ask about gun laws, things are totally different, even just a few decades ago. And so, I don't know, morally, would I want to steep down to that level to also seek justice? Ideally not, but I can totally understand why the town is feeling this way, because it is bringing violence and potential death to other people, just other innocent bystanders.
Right.
So at a certain point, to your point, something's got to give.
Yep.
And if it's not the legal system, I can't believe Batman didn't show up. You know what I'm saying?
Justice, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. So this is where the kind of fascinating angle comes to play. So eventually, the people of Skidmore held a town meeting by themselves. They called on the morning of July 10th, 1981. And in this meeting, they were going to decide what should be done about Ken Rex McElroy and all of his crimes. Police encouraged citizens to avoid him entirely, perhaps form a neighborhood watch. All very good suggestions, but this man is completely without rules, it feels like. So the citizens are left with no other recourse, is what they're feeling.
Yeah. It's just it's an unfortunate situation that people are just being shoved into. And it shouldn't be something that people have to think about or deal with.
God, no.
Let alone a small town where everyone's going to know everyone. And
I don't know if I can properly convey the size of this cozy little town. Every time I drive through one of these small towns in the US, it always has that kind of, I've only seen it in a movie feel.
You're right.
These sleepy little towns. But,
Yep.
you know, I was looking at some of these spots, for example, the D&G Tavern that I'm about to talk about. The building still exists, but the business doesn't. And so I'm looking around the street views, and I think the population conveys the size, but genuinely, you could chuck a baseball across the property of this town, the legal incorporated town. That's how small it is.
That's such few people.
Right. And to wake up every day knowing that you kind of can't avoid this dude unless, you know, he's living on the outskirts or something. Like, you're waking up knowing that it's like they're in the house with you at that point.
Right.
So while this town meeting's going on, again, July 10th, 1981, down the road at the local D&G Tavern, McElroy and his wife are visiting. Again, this is actually where Jillian wrote in the notes, yes, they had drinks in the morning. But, so they're right down the street at this tavern having some drinks, and the same group of citizens at the town meeting heard that McElroy was actually there. And so they said, well, fine, let's go talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And they made their way to the tavern. Soon after, the couple decided to leave and got into McElroy's pickup truck, but they were followed by a group of about 50 people who then confronted them all together. The arguments eventually turned to violence, as any argument involving McElroy did, and McElroy himself was shot twice from behind through the back window. And reportedly, no one called 911.
Oh, man, that's just like salt on the wounds.
Truly.
Everyone's like, yeah, just we'll call once it's confirmed to kill.
They'll figure it out. Yeah. And let's not forget, poor Trina McLeod is sitting in the passenger seat, and she's got, I'm sure, very complex feelings regarding her husband. I won't even attempt to assume, but she's now front row to this, essentially a mob, this heated environment, and to a murder. But we try to look into this. I asked Jillian too to see if she could help me figure this out. I don't know what the delay was between the crime itself and the investigation, so I want to put that on the record, but either way, sometime after the crime, the police began their investigation. They even got the help of the FBI, but no one had any idea who shot Ken McElroy, or at least they wouldn't say. There were 46 witnesses, and the FBI alone interviewed around 100 people. None of them named a suspect, and some of them claimed to not have even seen the event at all. The investigation in total found 2 different bullet casings in the truck.
Yeah, dude, it's not like the movies, man, where someone hides behind a wooden table or a car and it's just riddled with bullets and they survive. Bullets go straight through that stuff.
Straight, yeah. I do hate it when I was watching The Boys the other day, and Huey's pulling a file cabinet door onto his arm to act like a shield, and I'm like, that's not gonna stop a bullet, son.
No, not at all.
Turns out it was more for melee, but it does
Yeah.
happen in movies. They're like, I'll just hold up this thin sheet of paper and I'll be good.
Or I'll just use that to like combat like a machete or something. It's like,
Yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm. No, that sails through bamboo, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the case, the background, and the investigation as far as we are aware. You know, it wasn't much else to be seen, but there are still a few theories as to what went down. The second one is a little bit broader, the first one being more specific. So I think your gut instinct leans towards the second. But before we get there, I want to know your thoughts on this first one. So the first theory stems from the name given by McElroy's wife, Trina McLeod. In fact, She was the only person to give a name to the investigators, and when asked, she named Del Clement. During the questioning, she claimed she saw him shoot her husband. Otherwise, we couldn't find much else about her line of questions and answers. So Clement was the owner of the D&G Tavern, and like many Skidmore citizens, did not like McElroy. Basically having a motive of hatred plus maybe seeking justice after all these years, or mob mentality, really ratcheting the emotions up. We may never really know the truth of the matter though, as Clement passed away in 2009 without ever having confessed. So we also have a crowd of 50 people who seemingly agree that mum's the word on what they saw that day. Perhaps the truth will eke out someday in future generations as kind of a local town story, but I don't know if we'll ever truly know. It does seem like there's a lot of witnesses, there was a lot of chaos, and the deed was done, and maybe everyone's just kind of washing their hands going, I don't know who did it, I don't care who did it,
Right.
We're done.
It's wild though, like so many witnesses, and if there's a ton of witnesses that knew who did it, how it didn't leak in some way, shape, or form, right?
100%.
How someone didn't feel guilt whatsoever or something like that, because that usually happens.
Usually, yeah. We do see that at least someone comes forward to say like, all right, even if it's a roundabout way with an anonymous letter, someone kind of lets it slip, because even though this guy was pretty dastardly, had just a sinister, dare I say, nefarious history with this town, I would imagine that at least one of those 50 or so individuals would have at least maybe, said something. But either way, we still have the fact that there were 2 different bullet casings in the truck. So to me, we're left with a few possible questions. I'm curious on your thoughts here. Does the additional bullet casing indicate that there was a second guilty party who wasn't witnessed directly by his wife? Perhaps is this simply a sign that several individuals within the crowd of about 50 people or so may have attempted to shoot at McElroy, and perhaps no one knows whose bullet truly ended his life? This could be why no one mentioned names in the investigation. They simply just weren't sure.
Are they both the same caliber?
That's the question we couldn't really figure out. We see everywhere that they're different bullet casings. We were trying to figure out, are they like shotgun? Are they rifle? Are they 2 different
Right.
calibers? Because that then leads to my next kind of question. Is it possible that one or both of these casings simply belonged to McElroy, thereby creating a dead trail? Because we know he had a proclivity for using rifles and shotguns, and so maybe these are just bullets or casings that are tumbling around in his truck anyway, and that the bullet casing that killed him is somewhere on the side of the road, and the bullet itself has sailed off to God knows where. So I don't know if it's possible that it's not evidence. It's possible that it is. I don't know. I wish I knew more.
Right.
So we essentially couldn't figure out, and we'll look a little closer too, but we'll see if we can find those casings. But either way, what I was interested in is, did they match McElroy's weapons? Did they match weapons that were known to be owned by any of the citizens, especially Del Clement? These are all things that are either known and not made public, or simply unknown, because to Christian's point, a lot of these weapons could be legally owned without having a necessary paper trail for the ownership. So
Yeah.
again, it just becomes smoke and mirrors at that point. Questions aside though, coming back to the author I mentioned earlier, McLean, he ended up living in Skidmore, by the way, as a result of his research, but he told Inside Edition it was an open secret that Del Clement was the one that fired one of the shots. Again, we've got 2 shots at least. That does make Del Clement a very likely suspect, but either way, he was never convicted for this incident. No one has ever been, and he has since passed on. All right, so I actually stopped down for just a second, wanted to do some extra research. So before we move on to the next theory, I did want to figure out, our man in the chair is on a phone call doing some business. So I wanted to look into these particular casings because I figured it had to be somewhere. And so per Wikipedia, which is a different collation of a lot of different sources, it seems that McElroy was shot at several times while sitting in his truck. And this group of townsfolk are kind of arguing with him and whatnot. So several shots go off and he is hit twice. Once by a centerfire rifle and once by a .22 caliber rimfire rifle. Again, that's per Wikipedia. And so these might be the very casings that are in the vehicle, which again, that also seems to be that these would be close shots if that's where the casings are landing.
Interesting. But is that the same different caliber, right?
I don't know enough about various rifles,
Same.
but I've seen one or two different sources say a 22 caliber rifle and an 8mm Mauser rifle. And again, it's hard to find the sources behind these sources, and so I don't know how reliable they are. I want to be completely honest about that. But yes, different calibers if you take those at face value.
Got it. Huh. So everyone was just trying to have a field day.
It seems like it. But it does seem to indicate my second question, which is that several shots rang out from a crowd of 50, or some have reported of upwards of 60, and thereby no one really knew who actually did it and what have you. Of course, you have the one eyewitness willing to tell a story and give a name. That's Trina McLeod. She mentions Del Clement. I'm sure he was absolutely one of the people that fired. I'm not sure if we'll ever know for a fact who did it, but that's where we move into the next theory, which I think tries to wrap up that whole idea nicely. So some believe that the decision to shoot McElroy was not a sudden choice or some sort of emotional decision that came about as a result of a mutiny from the town or this heated argument. No. It's thought that the citizens of Skidmore may have actually, at that town meeting, planned to kill him that very day. And then when finding out that he's down the street at the tavern, that's when they said, well, hey, no better time than the present. And I believe, again, it was like 11 a.m. or so. So perhaps they collectively decided to, hey, whatever goes down, let's remain silent about who did the deed or what we saw this day. I don't know if they picked somebody to be the person, but again, it seems that multiple shots rang out and only two connected. So to add to this theory, some believe that the decision to not point fingers and name suspects was an unspoken decision made by the town to protect the, air quotes, vigilante who killed the widely detested McElroy, taking justice for the town in their own hands, essentially. But that kind of wraps up everything we really know about the mystery of who killed Ken McElroy.
That would be one organized town. Also,
very organized.
Also, absolutely over the top story in terms of a town decided to take care of their problem.
Yeah.
So, as a group, they did something about it. Like, whoa.
Yeah. It almost feels, not to sensationalize or numbify this story, it almost feels so heightened emotionally, and like it almost seems so out of the bounds of reality that it almost feels like a movie premise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100% does. Yeah, this one person was a menace, and so it's like one of those things where the whole movie, it's like, yeah, it's just how it's playing out, and then you have your two or a couple main suspects in terms of who killed him, and then like some of the very last shots flashes back to the town deciding as one. That's the twist.
Yeah,
we are going to as one take care of this problem, and you go, whoa, the whole town was involved. That's a movie for sure.
It ends with a montage of, dad mowing the lawn, little Bobby playing in the sandbox, grandma's eating some oatmeal, grandpa's reading the newspaper, and then it cuts to the credits with a happy song, and you're just like, whoa,
yeah,
everyone's got blood on their hands. But
yeah.
I guess I'm conflicted because like that guy had it coming to him for 37 years until he got his quote first loss or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Wild.
It's very much a conflicted thing for sure.
Yep.
This is a very interesting story.
Very interesting. And it's one of the times where, we do true crime spread amongst unsolved, internet mysteries, supernatural. And in a kind of dark way, it's nice to have a less than innocent victim. We don't just have a family disappearing or someone being gunned down. You've got a terrorizer of the town who has literally assaulted people in so many different ways that you're kind of like, yeah, you're left kind of rooting for the illegal action to take place. It's wild. It's a weird one for sure.
It's definitely it invokes weird emotions, what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, someone take action because this person is an absolute menace and needs to be stopped.
100%. It took someone this evil to push good people to take justice into their own hands.
Right.
Again.
But also in doing so, it's like, how does that, mentally mess with someone?
Oh, yeah.
And then on top of everything, it's just like, there is the whole, should anyone be taking, justice into their own hands, because then that gets messy and it becomes just a closet full of mess at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no easy answer for this. There is the clear moral answer and there's the emotional answer, but yeah, I'll leave that to the viewer to everyone's sitting in their car, mowing their lawns, however they're listening to this going, yeah, you know what? Get that guy. Get him out of here.
Yeah.
I think that's the obvious, but yeah, still a complex, just wild. I'll just leave it at that. It's such a complex set of emotions that this person has wrought.
Yeah. I think this episode is unique in the sense that it's very emotionally driven.
Mm-hmm.
It's so simple yet invokes so much emotion.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. This was a solid one.
All right. Well, that has been the wild case of who killed Ken Rex McElroy. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the number one way to support Red Web now that we're independent is patreon.com/redweb. Fredo, they get a whole host of things over there, but the one thing I'm super stoked about is the show hosted by you called Movie Club.
Movie Club. Yeah, I mean, this is movies are a part of Red Web's DNA, and that is an outlet for us to watch movies, talk about said movies, and also see newer movies like we've done with Long Legs. Lord help me with that one.
Oh my God, that one was a trip. Not to make a far-fetched pun about legs, but yeah, we watched Long Legs. We've done Scream. Christian has talked about Ganjiam Haunted Asylum for years, and so we finally were able to watch that. We have Pulse that recently came out, and that was led by Jillian. A lot of wild horror movies that we talk about over on Patreon exclusively, but of course you get this podcast ad-free and a lot of other goodies. If you like seeing behind the scenes, you just want to support us directly, tiers start at $5 only, and it is, again, so appreciative and keeps this show running. So again, that's patreon.com/redweb. But with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.
No, you won't. Just kidding. Yes, you will.
He's a ghost.